Hi, this is Jennifer Lee. I'm here with Rakesh Gupta, and this is our 36th automation hour. We're very excited for today's webinar series because this is our first session that we have actual Salesforce on to guest present today. So for those of you who are attending for the first time, all lines will be muted, and do use the chat function to ask questions of Alex and Jason as they do their presentation. And if we don't get to your question today, we'll continue on in our Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour. So after this session, we will be posting the recording as well as the chat on automation, our website, as well as the Trailblazer community, and we will also be communicating out via Twitter. So for our upcoming sessions, we do have some great speakers lined up for you. And if you have a cool use case and process automation solution that you would like to share with the community, do submit your idea and we will reach out and get you scheduled in. And I also want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Concrete.io, for supporting this webinar series. And here are your co-hosts, David Litton, myself, and Rakesh Gupta from Dreamforce 17. And for those of you in the audience who are going to Selfie Streamin' and would like to learn more about Flow, I recommend stopping by my session called Flow It, Automate Processes with Not Code. It is in Atlanta, Selfie Streaming, March 15th to 16th. And with that, again, very excited to have Salesforce on today, Alex Edelstein, who is a product manager of Lightning Flow. So let me hand that off.
All right, hello. Good to be here, everyone. Thanks a lot, Jennifer. Let me get my screen up. Pleased to be able to talk today. We're going to show you some fun stuff. We're going to show you some Spring 18 features and demos. And we are going to even show some roadmap. I'm here with Jason Teller. He's another product manager on the Lightning Flow team. And let's get started. So the first thing we have to start out with, of course, is our forward-looking statement. And some of the things, not most of the things, but some of the things we're going to be talking about and showing today haven't shipped yet. So please make any purchase decisions only on our publicly available products. And we also like to start our presentations with a thank you. I personally am continually thankful that I get the opportunity to work here at Salesforce on this. I haven't been here that long. I was a Salesforce user for, let's see, 14 years. And now I get to work on the Flow team and help sort of expand the functionality and the capabilities of the environment. So thank you guys very much for that. And I think that we have a snappy intro video to start with. So let me see if I can get this hooked up. This is a little video we put together really just for fun. And what it's focusing on is just one element of the Flow functionality story, and that is the capability to insert Lightning components into Flow screens and take advantage of what you can do there. Now let's see. Here we go. Here's the uploaded video. So for a few minutes, we'll let the music do the talking. Good, powerful new things. And as you're going to see, that is only that video is already out of date, And there are a bunch of cool new screen components that I got to edit in there. Just to show all of the things that can be done. So let's move on. I'm going to show you a few of our sort of marketing slides. We got enough time, and I wanted to share them with you. But we'll get in quickly to the sort of guts of the things. This is one we like to show. We like to brag about some big companies. But those numbers down at the bottom are always impress me. 100 billion processes per month are now running on the Salesforce system, and it's growing at a very, very rapid clip. So there's a lot of adoption going on, and the skills involved in creating and maintaining flows are in greater and greater demands. The thing that you want to take away from this slide is that when you do a workflow, you really don't want to end up down here in this circle. This circle is this is like where workflows go to die. So make sure when you're creating your workflow and you're trying to get from here to here that you don't end up in the dangly circle. That's basically the thing that, personally I feel is the important thing to take away from here. What I like about this slide is the fact that to get these images into these circles requires Salesforce to keep a full-time 84-year-old Japanese grandmother on staff, and she actually does this somehow with just a single paintbrush and a small block of black ink. It's a sort of lost art, but it allows us to do these cool circle things. From a process point of view, of situations.
Alan, you think we've lost your response?
Yeah. What was the last thing you heard me say?
From a process point of view on the previous slide.
Okay, let me go back then. So you heard me say from the process point of view. Okay. Let me just move on from this slide. I think it's kind of self-evident then. That one, well, let's just keep moving. This is sort of what the Lightning Flow family looks like today. We introduced this phrase Lightning Flow to try and create something of a family name to an umbrella term to refer to Process Builder and Cloud Flow Designer and the underlying flow engine and the ecosystem that it puts it all together. And so a lot of the energy that's going on, such as the new flow builder that's being designed, is all aimed at making this a more unified experience. So some of the new things in spring 18, the first section, guided dynamic processes. A lot of that you're going to hear about. You're going to hear more about all of these things, but basically stages, tracking breaking flows up into different groups and being able to track where you are, handoffs, pause and resume, more control over your flows, dynamic form UI through things like the dynamic question component that you can now build and the dependent pick list component. Integrations are being worked on. Lightning Flow for Service went into pilot. That is a whole range of services that are designed to better make the experience for Service Cloud and flows more tightly bound. And then local flow actions. I'll be showing you some demos of direct data queries and browser integration and things that you can do with this new feature. The screen components that you saw featured in the video are part of our big push into rich visual experiences. And finally, The Lightning Bolt is live in the App Exchange store, making it easier to deploy solutions. So how's my audio coming through right now? Is it okay?
Yes.
All right, good. Here's a little more detail on those, organized in a slightly different way. It's basically the same message. You know, the dynamic web capabilities of Lightning components, which you're going to hear me harping on over and over again, is exciting because it means that you don't necessarily have to wait for Salesforce to build something into the core product. There's now ways that anybody can build a feature for Lightning Flow and publish it in a way that you can install it. And it's still in early days. The publishing mechanism, the installation mechanism is not where it's going to need to be in terms of ease of use, but the potential is tremendous. And I truly believe that Flow is becoming the best app dev environment for across all of Salesforce. And I think rather than, you know, kind of go over these, we've got individual slides for each of these. So I'm going to move forward, as you can see, Spring 18 was a pretty comprehensive set of functionality. So let's start talking a little more about screen components. In this screen, this is an actual screen on the right, and what you can see here is it really doesn't look like, you know, traditional flow screens. There's a lot more going on. The progress indicator at the top is a base Lightning component that's been added in. Dynamic question is an unofficial component that I wrote up, you know, over the holidays, and basically allows you to create one of these questions that pops open additional sub questions or child questions depending on what the user selects. I'll give you a demo of that soon. And although I had to use code to build it, nobody has to use code to use it. And that's one of the exciting things about the components, the component direction. File uploader was actually included in the core feature set. So that's an example of one of these components getting sort of to the point where it's distributed and supported just like any feature. Some of the components will eventually get there, and other components may be available on App Exchange. It kind of depends going from component to component. Data table is an example of a powerful component. We aren't able to zip this one up and make it completely clicks not code because of some limitations in the interface between Flow and the Lightning component. So using this one effectively inside of your screen is doable, but requires, so this one still requires a little bit of Lightning code configuration. So some components aren't quite at that drag and drop level, but are going to evolve in that direction. Pause and resume is part of an ongoing effort to give you more control over your flows. Any flow can now have a pause button, and this is particularly useful for longer flows. You don't want to lose that information. You don't want to force the users to always have to get through the entire flow. When you pause the flow, you can then pick it up where you left off, and you can also have somebody else pick it up, and we call that handoffs. And that is really effective in the sense that you can take your sharing rules, your sharing settings, the stuff that you're probably long familiar with, and basically apply that to these long-lived flows. There's also several different ways that we added to the sort of how you can launch flows. The one that I think may end up having the biggest individual impact is this one in the upper left. I really like the fact that you can now, anywhere you can use a quick action, you can now launch a flow. And what I really call these things, technically this is just a quick action, but I call this a flow button. So I like the fact that you can now stick a flow button, a custom flow button on any record page. And that's got a lot of potential. The community cloud integration has been very strong. What you see in that little particular case, it was also highlighted in the video we just showed, is that you can go into Community Builder, you can drag a flow onto any page, and it will just start working there. And if you're in Service Console, you can now put your frequently used flows on the utility bar. Screen overrides is the one feature that we have in well, it's not the one feature, but it is a key feature in Spring 18 that does require programmatic access. It's powerful, but it's designed for developers who want a greater degree of customization. A lot of integrators, a lot of consultants who are building Lightning components, they're building Visualforce pages, they're building Apex classes. They want to use Flow, but they needed more control. So we've made it possible to get rid of the next and previous buttons. You can now have next and previous trigger only when your code says it should trigger. And that gives you a lot more control over things. So let's get back to sort of the flow screen components. Dynamic question I mentioned. This is a case. If you saw release readiness, you saw me focusing on this, and I think I'll actually start showing some demos here because I want you to see this in action. So let's go take a look. That page, by the way, that you just saw, that's the secret black tab page that we use to give permissions to pilots. Perhaps never before seen in public because no one's as clumsy as I am, but that's the secret black tab page. So, all right, here we have a case where we start out in Service Console, and we've got Lauren calling in, and Lauren has a case, and we're going to use this action list over here. This action list component is actually I mentioned a pilot called Flow for Service, and that pilot program is all about integrating Flow more effectively into Service Cloud. This component, the action list, is part of that pilot. It's designed to create a sort of easy margin way to launch your flows. And so let's suppose that Lauren's calling in. Lauren wants to close a credit account. And that's interesting. Okay, so what we're looking at here on this screen is this is sort of a little test framework I put together to highlight some of these dynamic questions. So, some of these screen components. Up here, we've got what's actually the most vivid of the components is also one of the simplest. This is just a little script display component designed to sort of let you pop a big sentence in this kind of scenario where you want to feed the service agent just the instructions they need. Now here, this simple little radio button, this is the one that's got a lot hidden under the covers. So I click the yes button, I get these questions opened up here, and here we have the dynamic question. You could actually, I could configure it, and in a minute I'll change this. In fact, why don't we do that right now? Let's suppose that a new requirement comes in and one of the business managers says, hey, you know what? This is kind of great. I love the fact that we can collect these 3 pieces of data when yes is clicked, but when no is clicked, I want you to add a checkbox. And that kind of thing, you know, to do in a nice connected way here where it only happens when no is clicked, that is, you know, something that is, you know, you really haven't been able to do declaratively before. But with dynamic question, with all of these components, what we're really shooting for is we're trying to make it so that when you install this into your org, you simply configure it declaratively the same way that that you do any part of the flow experience. So if we go in here to the screen that we were just looking at, And here we have the dynamic question. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. If you want to see more details, there's a video about dynamic question that you can find out about on our components page, and I'll provide the URL to that. And there's also, I went into detail on the release readiness videos. So if you want to see some more demos, go back to Salesforce Live and check out the release readiness videos for platform and for admin. So in this case, we want to add a checkbox. So I'm going to signal that to flow by typing CB1 here. And then I'm going to specify what the label of that checkbox should be. So let's say activate foobar machine upon completion. And that's really kind of all I have to do. Now, if I really wanted to activate something, then what I probably need to do is capture the value of that checkbox and do something with it downfield. So let's go, and where is it? Checkbox output value 1. There it is right there. So we could create a new value. It could be a string checkbox. Let's see, foobar machine validation state, and let's set this to Boolean, and we can set it to the output there, and that's basically all that takes. So if I go and save this, and then I'm going to activate it, those of you who saw me do this in the Release Readiness Live will recall that in both of my demos I managed to put a typo that I had to fix in real time. So here is this, and we click on no, and here we have the checkbox showing up. So it's that easy to change the UI in one of these compound dynamic questions. There's a couple other goodies though. I've been talking about dynamic question for a couple months now, but this little control here, this one we only made available publicly about a couple of weeks ago. This is a dependent pick list control. We've gotten a lot of requests over this over the years. So I've got here a pick list. This is the controlling pick list. I'm going to select private bank, and notice that this dependent pick list popped up, and I've got a set of choices that were configured relative to this private bank setting. So apparently, if private bank is selected, you select from elite, signature, and VIP. But let's suppose that instead of private bank, this is a retail customer. You select a retail customer, it changes, and now the choices are metropolitan, rural, and suburban. So this is something that has been, really not feasible in a practical way to do in a single screen in Flow. A lot of you have asked for it. Let's take a quick look at how that is configured, just so you can see what's involved. And with a dependent pick list, you basically specify for each value. Let's see, that one is, yeah. So in this case, what I did was I said if the parent choice is private bank, then use the dependent pick list called private bank categories. But if the parent choice is international, then use the dependent pick list, which is a custom pick list field called global categories. And here is where we're actually saying, oh, by the way, this is a case. You actually have to specify what the core object is you're working from. So all you have to do is fill out some attributes and values, and you've got dependent pick lists now. And the very latest hot off the presses component that has been unofficially made available, I published on this, I think on Saturday maybe, is this lookup control. So you now can insert a lookup control into a flow screen. Right now, I'm looking up accounts here, and then this is contacts. And then this is ships. There's no particular rational reason for picking a ship. I just wanted to show you that this can be done with custom objects just as easily. And there's a couple things to highlight here. One is just how easy it is. This is all it takes to hook that up, to hook up one of those controls. I simply typed in account. And then here I actually get to say, hey, you know what? I want to show the name. You aren't limited to only showing the name. There might be some other field that you want to search on besides the name and have show up when that pops up. And you can do that as well. You can specify the label, of course, and then you can separately indicate, okay, after they actually select what they're trying to select in this lookup control, which field do I actually want to export and pass back to the flow for use down the flow later on. And that's often going to be something like ID, so that you can go and do something with that record. So, if you're not familiar with flow screen components, what you're going to see when you go and look is that when your org was updated to Spring 18, this new little extension appeared. So if you drag one of these Lightning components in, you essentially can go here and you'll get to pick from all the flow enabled components that are available in your organization. So when you install one of these components, it shows up in this list. And that sounds good, but I'm going to keep going here. So that's dynamic question. I talked about dependent pick lists, allowing you to do that. Lookup, with the lookup, one of the things that was nice was I didn't have to write that all myself. I actually took an existing Lightning component written by a Salesforce integrator called OpFocus. They had published it. They had published the source code. I would simply took that source code and wrapped it in a little flow logic to make it show up in flow. And that's one of the beauties of having a platform and in being able to tap into this component world. If you don't like one of the ways that one of these components that you've just seen is configured, if it doesn't quite meet your needs, you can go to one of your developers or consultant or yourself, and you can just create your own version. The source code for all of these is all publicly available in GitHub right now. And so what we're hoping is that some of you listening here are going to create your own, modify some existing ones, come back and post and say, hey, I created a version of this that does pick lists a slightly different way. And then we can either integrate your changes into the version that we're unofficially publishing, or just say, hey, great, publish that as a second choice that people can have. Let's move on, because we've got a lot more to talk about. Flow stages, I'm going to hand it over to Jason to talk about flow stages. This is really about guiding end users through a multi-step process. Jason, let's see. I'm going to have to hand this over to you, right? Make you, here we go, make you the presenter.
Great.
Why don't you take it away?
All right. Thanks, Alex. All right, hello everyone. In case we haven't met, my name is Jason Teller. I work with Alex on the Process Automation PM team. Ostensibly, I am the PM for the Process Engine, and Process Stages is one of the things that we came up with for our spring release that is pretty cool. I think in the slide that Alex had just up in a minute ago there, it's really designed as a sort of visual indicator for your customers or end users that are going through your flow to be able to see the different stages that they're at. What sort of makes it different in the sense that basically you can actually dynamically change these stages as you go through a flow, as opposed to sort of these fixed process indicators that you often see in a lot of other places. In terms of actually reflecting the stages back in the UI, though, I mean, what you really are looking at is a Lightning component here that is essentially the same type of path component that we typically use, but it reflects the stage information that we're passing to it as part of the flow. So here we have a simple flow, and this is in my my demo environment. So let's say you're Elon Musk and you want the executive level version of your Falcon Heavy launch. And so basically you just want the sort of top level of how this thing actually goes. So we start on this page. You can see there's two stages here. You have your launch prep and your launch go. Sounds pretty simple. Let's go ahead and move along. Assuming my demo environment wants to play nicely with me. Looks like it wants to reload. This is the cutting edge stuff. This was last night's code, so it doesn't always show everything that we would like it to show. Here we go. Okay, let's try that again. Click next. There we go. Okay, so where are we now? We've now advanced one step in the stage. That's been checked, and we have one more step to go. At this point, we have the ability to abort the launch. So if we click abort, we'll actually be triggering a subflow to go to the abort. But that's okay. You know, we are SpaceX. We never abort anything. So let's just keep going. And then we jump to this launch countdown stage. So if you see the difference here, I had two. Whoops, demo environment. I had two of these, launch, go, and I decided at this point that we're not aborting. So we're going all out. So we're going to go ahead and add the remainder of the stages here, the launch countdown as well as the liftoff stage. So that way you know we're actually continuing to progress. So we have launch sequence now with counting down 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we go ahead and we lift off. So we've basically had two stages. We appended the additional stages as we reached that point in the flow. And then we counted through those, progressed through those particular stages. So that's kind of how the stage functionality works in a more dynamic version of it. Let's take a quick look behind the scenes, what we've got. I won't go through all the details because you can, it's pretty straightforward in terms of how you set it up, but I will give you sort of the quick overview. I've already set up a couple stages here. If I look in the Explorer, you can see I have countdown, go, prep, liftoff, and one that I didn't use called the end. And so if you can see here, once we've got these stages created, you can basically use the assignment node to actually assign the stages that you want. So in this case, I basically have my current stage set to whatever the launch prep is at this point in the flow. Now you insert the assignment nodes wherever you want.
Hey, Jason, we've lost your audio.
Jason?
It's the concept of active stages. So when you set up a stage, you have the option of having it, here, let me go ahead and pull it over here, whether or not it's active by default. Active by default means when the flow actually loads up, it will actually show on the indicator as one of the active stages. The current stage is the one that you're currently at, and so that'll move as you move through the flow. In this case, what I've done is I've taken the ones that were already active and I've added two more, which is launch count and launch liftoff. And if you remember, that progress indicator added two more stages to the end. That's what I did here. And then I moved our current stage to that countdown piece in the progress bar. So what's nice about this sort of setup is that you can actually insert these assignment nodes when you want the stages to actually change or get added to. And then you can do any sort of processing logic you want in between those specific areas. So basically, you can click them in where you think it's useful to provide visual information to the customer and not do any changes if you don't think it's useful and you just want to do some more processing on your side, or even potentially go through a number of screens without actually changing the stages on each screen. So that's the quick and dirty overview over our stages functionality. I think I'll go ahead and point out while I'm on this page, Alex had showed a slide where we had paused flow interviews. So that's something else. We have this component now. You can actually drag and drop on your page to show the paused flow of interviews that you had, which then can be resumed, as Alex mentioned, by you, or if you use the sharing rules, by whoever else actually, has the ability to go ahead and resume those flows via sharing. All right, Alex, back to you.
All right. I think you actually have to give me presenter back. Yep. Perfect. All right. Thanks a lot, Jason. That was great. I want to talk a little about the local flow actions that I mentioned briefly and direct data queries. This is kind of aimed at enterprise customers and medium-sized businesses that have sort of complex data environments and a lot of data on non-Salesforce systems. But in fairness, there's probably most customers have at least some data that's not in the Salesforce system that they want to get accessible for their Salesforce stuff. Now, there've been in the upper left, you can see some of the ways that you can get access to data, some of the integration pathways that exist. We wanted to add another one to help customers who essentially have said, hey, I have all of this data. I have it in Oracle databases. I have it in IBM databases. I have it in these different line of business apps. And it's a real pain because I have to get at it, I have to go out through the Salesforce cloud. I have to make these call outs. I have to use my limits. I have to open up a hole in my external firewall to let Salesforce get back in. Well, in a direct data query, you use the power of Lightning components and you can have an actual flow action that makes the query right from essentially your own computer. So this is kind of this kind of shows how it works. The flow is going from the top of the slide to the bottom of the slide. And generally, most flow elements are executed on the server, but local flow actions execute down in the Lightning environment in your browser. And so they could do things like make an Oracle request and get that direct data query accessibility. So, for example, in the demo I'm about to show you, that request is actually going to go through several different layers of technology. It's going to make a call out to Amazon AWS. It's going to go through a Lambda function and through the RDS database system, and finally query a SQL database. And yet none of that needs to be visible to the customer, to the user of the flow. So let me basically go forward here to right here. So the idea here, this is a pretty common scenario. You're extracting the last 4 digits of the social security number of the customer, and you want to do a query, and you don't want the whole social security number to be accessible to the person who's using the flow. You know what? I'm not running the right version of this flow. Let's go and run back to here. And anyways, the way we've designed that particular demonstration, the social security number lives in that SQL database. And you want to be able to take the data that the user is saying over the over the phone. And I'll get back to some of these things that I just passed in a second. And you want to basically do an effective query. So what happened there was a local flow action made a query, hit an Oracle database. It wasn't correct. The SSN wasn't correct. The agent never saw that SSN, and only if the customer knows the right value does the SSN match. Notice the toast that just popped up. This is another local flow action component. One of the things flow action components are really good at is doing things that can be done in the browser environment, like popping up toasts. You might have noticed, I zipped by it pretty quickly, but this knowledge article popped up. And the reason this knowledge article popped up was that, whoops, okay, I did not want to do that. The reason that knowledge article popped up is that the way this particular flow is set up, it's set up to check and see, hey, is this customer in Massachusetts? So you'll notice here the script says a required disclosure is open in another tab. The flow, if it sees that the customer is in Massachusetts, it loads this knowledge article. And that's useful. It's a local flow action that's actually popping this page into another tab here. And that's another good use of the local flow action pilot. What you see here is the data table that I mentioned. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to close these accounts. I'm going to close 36 and 204. Watch over here and see what happens when I do that. So we're ready to close. We verify the SSN. And you'll notice that it closed and updated visually, didn't refresh the whole page. You were using a local flow action called update screen to do a smart refresh of the screen. That's just another little improvement that is doable there. So let's go back here. And so here I mentioned the browser integration, and I'm going to move a little faster just because I want to make sure there's time for questions. This is the Lightning Flow for Service pilot that I was talking about, and how we are working hard to get it more integrated into service, into the Service Cloud. And then just briefly, some of the things you may be familiar with, but it's not always. We tend to get a little too focused on the latest release and realize that not everyone has the luxury of spending all of their time keeping up on the latest features. But you can use App Builder to embed flows very easily from the palette. Platform events allow you to trigger process builder processes based on any sort of signal from either from the Salesforce world or the outside world. It's very, very easy to create a platform event. External services is a new way of adding a flow action that makes a call out to some web service like a Slack or a Twilio, and gets that information back without you having to write any code. It uses the new Open API specification. That's quite powerful. Just briefly, it's a subject that's near and dear to everyone's heart. How is the Flow Builder replacement going? The project is in full gear. It's not going to be a quick project, but it's moving along nicely. This is the kind of design work that's being done behind the scenes. I took this from a presentation of 232 slides just about Flow Builder design. This is a screen that kind of shows what it's going to look like, where it's going visually. You can see how there's a lot of resemblance to App Builder and other Salesforce things. We're of course trying to create a more unified story. Here's just another little piece of flavor, some of the work that's going on to designing the powerful combo boxes that are a core part of the flow design experience. And then finally, just to touch on a few, give you a little bit of a preview of summer release. You may be playing with spring for the first time, but here at Salesforce, we've actually been working on active development of the summer release since the beginning of the year. So, by far the biggest investment for summer is ongoing work into Flow Builder. We're also working on bringing flow actions and Lightning Flow for Service to general availability. The Flow Debugger, Jason's going to touch on in a second. There's some logging improvement work that's going on to make it easier to see how you're using your limits, where the problem might be if you're getting limit warnings. Some additional improvements to flow stages, the ability to set an org-wide email address for approvals. But let's take a quick look at this debugger feature, because it's something that's very very exciting for anybody who is sort of who designs flows and wants to find the problems.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, this is something pretty exciting, I think, for all of us. And Everybody has sort of worked on flow. In case you didn't notice, we're back at my little stages screen that I was showing a few minutes ago. With those with good eyesight may have come up to the fact that we have a little button here. It says debug. So I wonder how that works. Well, let's go ahead and click on it. Now, of course, I'm showing you this all under safe harbor. This is still in sort of the work in progress prototype stage, so it's not going to actually look like this, but you'll kind of see the information that we are looking to provide as part of this. So again, no firm commitments, and again, everything that actually Alex described on the roadmap is also under safe harbor because it hasn't been released yet. But anyway, so basically we'll have an input screen. That's kind of convenient. You can go ahead and enter what you want for the variables that you have here as inputs that you could go ahead and run your flow with. And then you go ahead and click on debug. So what happens? Basically what you get is your screen information up here, much as you would see it in the actual flow, but what we've got now is the information that's basically going on within the flow as it's being run. So as you can see here, we have the assignment node that you remember seeing from the flow designer here, and it's got the current stage, and it resulted in this launch sequence current stage coming out, the interview information, the active stages, current stage, etc. And as we move through the flow, for each piece, it basically adds the information that we have for that particular node. So we think it'll be pretty useful. You have all of this information getting added to it as it goes throughout the whole flow to basically see where you are, all the different steps you've been taking to that point in case you run into any issues and you need to debug it. That's the short and simple version, but we do feel that this should be pretty useful functionality based on a lot of the feedback that we got from all the MVPs about how, as well as our customers, about how they could use more information to do flow debugging. And with that, back to you, Alex.
All right, great. Okay, so I think we're going to move to questions. The only thing I have at the end here is another thank you for essentially thank you for being patient with the things that we haven't had a chance to fix or do right. We know that there's a lot of areas of the product that need to be improved, and we hope to continue to get to those. Why don't we start taking some questions? Do Jennifer, Rakesh, David, would one of you like to maybe toss a question over?
Sure. So there are questions about the packaging of flow, so we'll publish that with the deck after the session. There's a question from, are stages 100% unique to each flow, or can we create an org-wide template or sets of stages, like support process, to be used across several flows?
The stages are going to be unique to the primary flow that's being leveraged, that you have those stages leveraged for. So if you actually call into a subflow, for example, you can reference stages that are in the primary flow, but the scope of the stages is within that main flow that you're calling everything from.
Another question, perhaps?
And then there was a previous question from Tamar on whether these Lightning components and flows were available in Classic, or were they only available in Lightning Experience?
In general, most of the Lightning component functionality works fine in Classic. We use Lightning Out technology, so any restrictions that Lightning Out has on the use of Lightning in Classic will apply to flows.
Yeah, so basically you need to have the Lightning runtime for the flow to run inside of it. And
that can be done in Classic, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes.
Sorry, yeah, that's what I meant to say. It's in Classic, if you have the runtime enabled for the flow, you can run these in Classic with the Lightning components.
Okay, great. Another question?
But there are some pros and cons of enabling Lightning runtime, so make sure that you read a help document of Salesforce.
Yes, that is very, very true. Please check on that. I mean, it's possible. Obviously, from a Salesforce perspective, we recommend running in Lightning.
Next question is from Mo. Will we ever get the option to have an on-delete trigger? So if a record is deleted, pass this on to a variable. Big limitation right now, which means we have to code around it.
I think this refers to the fact that you can set a bunch of events to trigger in Process Builder, but not a delete, right?
Correct.
I don't think there are any plans right now to change that in Process Builder. But I was talking about it with the devs the other day. The new platform event technology creates an alternative way to solve that. What needs to happen is someone needs to build a simple little Apex trigger or action that allows you to specify a class and then have that fire a platform event, and then you can set up a process builder that listens for that platform event. So the short answer is I think it will become possible, but it's not possible. As you know, it's not possible today, and it may require a little bit of cleverness to solve it.
Yeah, I could just add to that really quick. It's Alex is accurate in what he's saying. The other thing that we are potentially looking at, again under Safe Harbor, is leveraging CDC, change data control events, to potentially be able to support this. But I guess the bottom line is it's not simply a matter of us just adding support to Process Builder. There needs to be an underlying platform change that needs to happen in order for us to be able to do this. So that's part of the reason why it's it's in the backlog, but it will be a while before.
Oh, really? You're saying that you can't even write an Apex trigger now to get notified on a delete?
I mean, I don't. We can talk about it a little bit more. It's basically there are ramifications around it rather than just simply writing the trigger.
Okay. All right. How about one more question?
Okay. The next one is I lost track of it. Okay, here we go. Can we hear some more about platform events and about external services? Will Swagger schema get richer for Salesforce Flow and get out of beta? Any roadmap for platform events replaying in UI?
Let's see. As far as external services goes, the team is telling me that they do expect to go general availability later on this year, basically. I don't think that's going to be the summer release, but perhaps the release after that. As far as replaying in UI, I'm not quite sure what you mean there. Feel free to elaborate on that question. Any questions that we didn't get to, we are happy to publish to the success community. As far as platform events goes, the main thing now is to get the word out about how easy they are to generate and use. I think the platform events team is focusing on making standard stuff inside the Salesforce world, generate platform events and use platform events the same way you can now do it with custom. So with that, I think we are out of time, but thank you very much. Hopefully this has been useful. There is a lot of information available at, oh, darn it, I don't have that URL handy, but we will publish some links to the Automation Hour Success community where you can find the components, where you can find information about the pilots, where you can basically get all the information we have available. So please continue to make use of Flow. Let us know what you think, and we'll talk to you again in the future.
Yeah, it was really great, Alex, you and Jason on with this presentation. And for those who did pose questions that we did not get to, please post those questions in our Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour, and we will answer them there. And with that, thanks again, everyone, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.